Hey there, wake up. It's Means Morning News. Just after 11 a.m. on the East Coast, I'm that newsman, Sam Sachs, and this is the Friday show. That is, unless you're one of our viewers in Micronesia, in which case, happy Saturday. Enjoy the show. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to open up a key border crossing into Gaza to allow more humanitarian aid in, following what was described as an angry phone call Thursday with the President of the United States. The White House has been saying for 6 months now that it doesn't have any leverage to change the behavior of the Israeli government, all while tens of thousands of Palestinians have been systematically slaughtered. But following the death of 7 food aid workers this week, President Biden finally decided to apply the slightest amount of pressure on Israel. According to a readout of the call from the White House, Biden, quote, made clear the need for Israel to announce and implement a series of specific, concrete, and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. He made clear that U.S. policy with respect to Gaza will be determined by our assessment of Israel's immediate action on these steps. So that's about as close as the administration has come so far to saying it will condition further military aid to Israel. White House officials also said Biden pressured Netanyahu to accept terms of a ceasefire deal or also risk changes in U.S. policy. After the phone call, the long-shuttered Erez border crossing was opened up, which should allow aid to reach some of the most desperate parts of Gaza. And right on cue, U.S. officials applauded Israel. National Security Council spokesperson Adrian Watson said in a statement, quote, "We welcome the steps announced by the Israeli government tonight at the president's request following his call with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu." Phew. Well, let's hope that does the trick, huh? Some people were pretty pissed. I know I'm being cynical here, and it is good that more aid will be allowed into Gaza after this. But the fact that it's taken this long, and that, as the Washington Post reported, the Biden administration agreed to send even more bombs to Israel on the very same day as the attack on the World Central Kitchen aid workers, it's hard not to be concerned that this is all just PR, an attempt to relieve some pressure on Israel in the Biden White House in the short term, all so that the genocide in Gaza can continue apace. It remains to be seen if this border crossing will stay open, if humanitarian aid will be allowed to enter, if the attacks on aid workers and journalists end, if the indiscriminate killing of Palestinians ceases, and if not, what exactly the U.S. will do about it, since the White House did not reveal what policy changes it would consider toward Israel. Also, in his call with Netanyahu, Biden said the U.S. strongly supports Israel in the face of threats from Iran, even though it's actually Israel that's trying to start a war with Iran, bombing the Iranian consulate in Syria and killing 2 top generals. But if there is any chasm developing between the U.S. and Israel, it would immediately be bridged by a war with Iran. And Netanyahu knows this, and so does Biden. Meanwhile, the UN Human Rights Council passed a resolution calling on Israel to be held accountable for possible war crimes in Gaza and for all weapon sales to Israel to be suspended. It's the first time that the council has passed a measure related to Israel's latest war on Gaza. Israel called a yes vote, a quote, vote for Hamas, and 28 countries didn't give a shit what Israel thinks and voted in favor of it anyway, including China, Cuba, Brazil, and South Africa. Also, European nations of Belgium, Finland, and Luxembourg supported it. 6 countries opposed the measure, including the United States, Germany, Paraguay, Argentina, Malawi, and Bulgaria. You can call it the new coalition of the willing, willing to let a genocide happen. Congress is up to something shady when it comes to student loan forgiveness. Buried inside legislation to authorize funding to the Federal Aviation Administration is a provision that prohibits executive department officials from doing mass student loan debt cancellation. Now, this prohibition only applies to flight education and training programs, but it's obviously in there for a reason, which is why the Debt Collective called it a red alert and urged the 45 million student debtors in the country to raise hell over it. The group's co-founder, Astra Taylor, tweeted, quote, "Make no mistake, this is a test flight. If they can make student debt cancellation illegal for some people, they will do it for others. Student debtors and their allies need to stick together and stick up for each other." The last few years have seen a debate erupt over whether or not the president and the Secretary of Education have the power to do broad-based student loan debt cancellation. The Higher Education Act is pretty clear on this. When it comes to student loans, it gives the Education Secretary the power to, quote, enforce, pay, compromise, waive, or release any right, title, claim, lien, or demand. And groups like the Debt Collective have urged President Biden to use that authority to do mass cancellations immediately without asking permission from the Supreme Court, which under right-wing domination will never assent to something like that, since the ruling class is skimming billions off the top of the student lending industry. So what's going on here is an attempt by certain members of Congress to legislate away that power from the executive, basically to undercut the debt cancellation movement. Again, if they can lock out pilots, they can lock out anyone. Also, this is just awful policy in a country dealing with a student debt crisis and a freaking pilot shortage. I do know that Chuck Schumer has said in the past that the president does have the power to do student debt cancellation and urged him to do so. So it'd be a real disgrace if he then let legislation pass out of his chamber that kneecaps that effort. Good news, there will be one less dipshit running for president this year. The centrist pro-corporate group No Labels has been trying for months now to field a candidate to run against Joe Biden and Donald Trump. But the Wall Street Journal reported this week that the search is over. The group couldn't find anyone to back. It did try, though. No Labels reportedly reached out to Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Kirsten Sinema, and Joe Manchin, who all surprisingly turned down the chance to run. The group was working to get ballot access in all 50 states. It succeeded in only 19 so far, despite receiving tens of millions of dollars from deep-pocketed donors. No Labels did suffer a setback last week when the chairman of the group, Joe Lieberman, died. As the Associated Press reported last month, Lieberman's death left a hole in the group. Quote, "At almost every major turn, Lieberman served as the group's chief public defender. He was also a private force in No Labels' presidential recruitment push. He insisted repeatedly in interviews as recently as last week that the nation is craving an alternative to Trump and President Joe Biden." He is right, the nation is craving an alternative, just not the one he imagines. Well, anyway, that's too bad for No Labels, but if your organization is struggling to fill a hole left by Joe freaking Lieberman, then it was never serious to begin with. Time to raid class enemy territory and kidnap an oligarch for this week's Rich Dick ceremony. Thanks for all the nominations on social media. Let's see, we've got The Wolf here, who nominated Hillary Clinton for telling voters to, quote, "get over yourself this election and just vote for Joe Biden." Yes, that's the slay queen attitude that cost Democrats the election in 2016 and gave us Trump to begin with. Surely it will work out this time, though. Got 2 nominations, actually, for Hillary Clinton this week. John Kirby nominated here, again, for running cover for Israeli genocide. We also got one of the owners of the Dolly, the ship that collapsed the Baltimore Bridge, Anthony Heng Tak Hin, nominated. He's trying to evade responsibility for the incident by citing a more than 150-year-old law that caps damages in maritime disasters. Here's a nomination for Puff Daddy. And Arona nominated every landlord, in particular some landlords in Suffolk County, New York, who got busted doing racial discrimination. Also, here's a nomination for billionaire NBA team owner and mortgage lender Dan Gilbert. And finally, here's a nomination for another landlord, Mark Fishman, in Chicago, who's trying to evict a Palestinian tenant for putting up a Palestinian flag in their window. There are now calls to boycott the prominent theater that Fishman owns in the city. Good. Get his ass. All very strong nominations today. Thank you, everyone. But ultimately, this week's Rich Dick is Oakland A's owner John Fisher. Congratulations, Mr. Fisher, now a two-time Rich Dick. Last June, he got the dishonors for threatening to move his baseball team out of Oakland if the city didn't cough up a bunch of money to buy him a new mega stadium, and then followed through on that threat, inking a deal to get the city of Las Vegas to help him pay for a new ballpark to move the organization there instead. In the process, Fisher fielded one of the worst teams in baseball history with the lowest payroll in the league, all in order to suck as much wealth out of the franchise as possible. Fans of the once proud team begged him to sell it, then protested, then boycotted. Nothing worked. And now Fisher is back in the Rich Dick stockades because in addition to moving the team to Las Vegas, he's now also moving the team to Sacramento. This week, Fisher rejected an offer from the Oakland Coliseum to continue playing there until the new Vegas stadium gets built sometime toward the end of the decade. And instead, Fisher signed a deal to play in Sutter Health Park in the state's capital, which is also home to the Giants' AAA affiliate, the Sacramento River Cats. So, the Athletics will play in a minor league ballpark for the next 3 years with a possible fourth-year option. It seats a little over 14,000 people and will be by far the smallest stadium in the major leagues, but Fisher is billing it as the most intimate in Major League Baseball. Fisher won't take a financial hit moving into a smaller stadium. In fact, he'll benefit because he'll still be pocketing roughly the same amount of TV rights money as before. And that's the real cash cow. So not only is Fisher hoarding funds that should be going toward fielding a proper team for the major leagues, but also funds that should be going toward a proper stadium and facilities for a major league team. He'll share stadium staff with the other teams that use the field, so that means layoffs at the Coliseum and more cost savings for Fisher. That also means this will be the final season that the A's play in Oakland. The owner just clowning on all the fans on the way out, stealing the copper out of an establishment that's been in the city for more than 50 years. The rest of Major League Baseball's owners could put a stop to this, but they won't, because they protect each other's class interests and because they think a team in Las Vegas will, in the end, be more profitable than a team in Oakland. To hell with all the fans. The artist's renderings of the new Las Vegas stadium were released last month. It's projected to cost $1.5 billion, with the city paying almost $400 million. Fisher has been cagey about where the rest of the money is going to come from, whether he'll dip into his own fortune, or I should say the fortune his parents, who founded Gap, built for him, or if he'll raise outside funding. But a lot of people in Las Vegas don't even want him to bring the team there, including the dang mayor. Carolyn Goodman said in an interview in February that Fisher should try to figure out a way to keep the team in Oakland. She did later backtrack. But there is a lawsuit challenging the public funding for the project that was brought by teachers who created the group Schools Over Stadiums. They're also trying to get a ballot referendum for voters to decide on it in November. So it's still not guaranteed that Fisher is even going to get the public investment in Las Vegas that he attempted to shake down the city of Oakland for. Fisher made a rare public appearance on Thursday to announce the move to the new stadium in Sacramento and gave one more screw you to the fan base, saying how excited he is to watch opposing players like Aaron Judge smash home runs against the A's. Take a look.
We're excited to be here for the next 3 years, playing in this beautiful ballpark, but also being able to watch some of the greatest players in baseball, whether they be athletics players or Aaron Judge and others, launch home runs out of this very intimate, the most intimate ballpark in all of Major League Baseball for the next 3 years.
Nice one, John. There are bad owners in sports. In fact, almost every single owner in sports is bad, especially if you're a fan of the team. But if John Fisher wasn't number one on the list of bad sports owners before this week's events, then he is now. If it was a just world, John Fisher would be put in a dunk tank sitting above raw sewage, and every single Athletics fan in Oakland would have their shot to drop him. But instead, this is the best we can do. John Fisher, you're this week's Rich Dick. All right, friends, the show ends this morning with a sunrise from Canada. It was sent in by Pat in Montreal, Quebec. Enjoy. Thank you, Pat. Show's over. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the team behind the scenes. Please sign up for Means TV if you haven't yet, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels, and follow us on social media. One day capitalism will fall. Until then, we're going to be right here. See you next week.